All Purana Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Gauranga. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatamanyasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Vidati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tadakalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sarjatam Sagaraganatam Vitam Tam Siddhivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Karjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagadata Shri Vishakam Vitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinavadhu Japate Kopesha Bhuka Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Yapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Gadavani Shwai Vishvana Suti Devi Pranami Haripe Namaste Girajaya Shri Govardhana Namane Ashesha Shaya Paramananda Dhanine Panchakapatarabhista Prabhasandileja Patitanam Bhavane Vaishnavi Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha Shivasana Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Marika Bandhu Matsangin Madguru Manmahadana Madnistaraka Madbhagya Madananda Namostite Asaru Saru Tadayan Atinicho Tatakara Anamuncha Karachinmam Premna Hritkatayo Spuraha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritta. Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam.
Tato Jayam Madhurayet.
Tato Jayam Madhurayet.
Nastapreshu Bhadreshu.
Nastapreshu Bhadreshu.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Bhagavate Uttama Shloke. Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Dinamane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharare Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paschita Deshitarare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, chapter number 28, text number 13. Srimad Bhagavatam will bring saintliness to the unsaintly. And Srila Prabhupada is the personification of Srimad Bhagavatam. In all ways and shapes, Srila Prabhupada can bestow saintliness to those who are unsaintly. Yavano paruda yatano. Yavano paruda yatano. Grastayam kalakanyaya. Priyam prajvara samshrishta. Purapalon vatapyata. Yavano parura yatano. Prastayam kalakanyaya. Puyam prajvara samshrishta. Purapalon vatapyata. Yavano parudayantano. Grastayam kalakanyaya. Puriyam prajvara samshrishta. Purapalon vatapyata. Please read.
Yavano parudayatano.
Yavano parudayatano.
Grastayam kalakanyaya. Parudayantano. Grastayam kalakanyaya.
Puryam prajvara samshishta.
Puriyam prajvara samshrishta. Purapalon vatapyata. Word for word translation. Yavana, by the Yavanas. Uparuda, attacked. Ayantanaha, his abode. Grastayam, when seized. Kalakanya, by the daughter of time. Puriyam, the city. Prajvara samshrishtaha, being approached by Prajvara, Purapalaha, the city superintendent, Anvatapyata, became also very much aggrieved. Translation: the city's superintendent of police, the serpent, saw that the citizens were being attacked by Kalakanya, and he became very aggrieved to see his own residence set ablaze after being attacked by the Yavanas. Purport: a living entity is covered by two different types of bodies, the gross body and the subtle body. At death, we can see that the gross body is finished. The actual living entity is carried by the subtle body to another gross body. The so-called scientists of the modern age cannot see how the subtle body is working in carrying the soul from one body to another. The subtle body has been figuratively described as a serpent or the city's police superintendent. When there is fire everywhere, the police superintendent cannot escape either. When there is security and absence of fire in the city, the police superintendent can impose his authority upon the citizens. But when there is all-out attack on the city, he is rendered useless. As the life air was ready to leave the gross body, the subtle body also began to experience pain. We're still hearing about the dying process. Kalakanya, of King Paranjana. And Kalakanya is attacked. And Chandavega, Kalakanya and his associate Chandavega have attacked. So Narada Muni is explaining this story to teach the lesson that fruitive activities are pointless, that we shouldn't engage in such activities which are Kaitava Dharma, which are cheating religion. In the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni speaks the whole canto. The first chapter is spoken by Shukadev, and then the rest of the canto is spoken by Narada. And Narada is explaining these various pastimes and teaching certain lessons. But at the very end of the canto, Yudhishthira is inquiring what is the perfection of human beings. And so Narada Muni explains how the different ashrams achieve perfection, explains the proper duties of a brahmachari, the proper duties of a grihastha, the proper duties of a vanaprastha, proper duties of a sannyasi. Then he gives some general instructions for human beings. But one of the very strong points that Narada makes is that one should give up with strong determination this envy of animals. This is coming from killing. And he explains that there's no religious principle which states that the Lord is ever pleased with animal sacrifices. These should be given up. They exist because actually people have a desire to kill. Really, it's a very distorted perversion that we've come to experience in the material world, but people actually like to kill things. That's a fact. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so much killing. And even as a little kid, I experienced that. There's a desire to kill. Killing birds, killing things, not that I was like a serial killer, but hunting, Like people, you grew up in Arizona, a lot of people hunt, and there's a desire that, oh yes, we must kill. And it's almost, you feel almost like if you're not a hunter, at least in the culture I grew up in, like, it was almost you were not a man. Hunting was a very manly thing to do. And you weren't really cool unless you were out hunting and your dad was hunting and everybody was hunting. Of course, I didn't really do that very much. But I used to think that, my friends, it was such a desire that they had. And so there's no religious principles in this type of hunting. But even still, there's still regulation that the government imposes, right? One has to have a hunting permit. One has to have a hunting license. One has to be, get a tag, and then they get drawn for a tag. And then if they can be, if they become unfortunate, they can get drawn, and then they get their tag and they get their area, I'm in 31C. And then they go and they, try to hunt a deer, whether it's with bows or with guns. And then if they do that illegally, if they kill a deer without getting their tag, they go to jail for poaching. So we see even in mundane distorted Kali Yuga government, there's regulation on killing. Because if there was no regulation, the hunters would just kill everything. That's a fact. That's why the rhinoceros is extinct. Elephants are going extinct. Tigers are going extinct. Because there's no regulation. The human propensity to kill is just going on wholesale. And, we see that in the slaughterhouses. So there is this propensity to kill. So Narada Muni is saying that this should be given up. That's real religious principles. And he's explaining that, this is not pleasing to God, but for the benefit and for the sake of those who are into that sort of thing, there's concession in terms of animal sacrifice. There is some concession. And Narada Muni gives some really beautiful advice in this chapter that one should give up sense gratification. One should firmly take a vow of celibacy. And he says that one can give up, Prabhupada says in the purport, one can give up this desire for sense gratification simply by making a firm conviction that I will not do. Very, very powerful purport. Just like as if one may be very hungry, one may put very palatable foodstuffs in front of one, but if one has taken a vrat for that day that I'm fasting today, one very easily can reject such foodstuffs. So in the same way, one should very strongly renounce sense gratification. I will be renounced from sense gratification with strong conviction. And by that strong conviction, one can overcome sense gratification, which is born of lust and born of the false ego. And that goes along with envy. One can overcome envy simply by strong determination and engaging in the proper processes of devotional service, seeing all beings, treating them all with respect and kindness, cultivating humility, and so forth. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out this subtle body. The serpent is the subtle body, and so the subtle body is often confused with the spiritual body in those who are uneducated about the intricacies of Krishna consciousness and devotional service. They think, oh, this is spiritual. They take some type of magic mushrooms or LSD and it affects the subtle body, and so then they think that, yes, this is a spiritual thing. Or we have dreams, or we go and we do astral projection. They think that that's a spiritual thing. Astral projection is a real thing, but it's not spiritual. It's the subtle body. So many times people confuse that which is subtle with that which is spiritual. And so therefore one has to very scrutinizingly study the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, understand what is spirit and what is matter. Nasato vidyate bhavo nabhavo vidyate sataha ubayoranti dristonyas. Forgetting the verse, actually. A long time since I quoted that one. Krishna is explaining that which is temporary is not real. It has no long-lasting effect. Therefore, it's simply based on the bodily conception of life. And that which is eternal has no change. So we can understand that, and we can take that and we can apply that to our spiritual practices. That if I'm fired up one day and not fired up the other day, I'm fired up one day and not fired up the other day, we're acting out of false ego. We haven't yet come to the spiritual platform. Anyos tattva-darshibihi. This is the conclusion of the sages. Ubayorapi dristonyas, anyos tattva-darshibihi. The sages have concluded this by studying the nature of both. That which is eternal comes from reaching the spiritual platform by strong practice of Krishna consciousness. So we don't want to confuse the subtle body for the gross body. So the subtle body and the gross body, but we both have them. We all have them. What does the gross body consist of? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. And what does the gross body consist of? Mind, intelligence, and false ego. So it's easy to understand we're not the gross body, but it's much harder to understand we're not the subtle body. The subtle body is much more tricky, and that's where really everything starts. Prabhupada explains, well, the 11th canto explains to some degree, but really we're the subtle body. We're more the subtle body than the gross body. We live in the subtle body, not the gross body. The subtle body is the real acting factor. The gross body is simply the manifestation of the subtle body. So out of all the elements of the subtle body, the most annoying is the false ego. He's simply hard to get over, right? The false ego is the worst, and it's the most demanding, the most damaging. It causes the most problems. So what's the best process for overcoming false ego? Because one needs to overcome false ego to achieve actual spiritual advancement. Humility. Yeah. Devotional service. Devotional service is the best way we can overcome the false ego. When it comes down to material desires, which are necessary to give up, it's necessary to give up material desires. When it comes to giving up material desires, the real solution is to become Krishna conscious. Sometimes you read so many things: take cold showers, do this, do that, wear this, wear that, avoid this, avoid that. That's very nice for someone in the lower stages, but we'll never achieve any success in overcoming sense gratification, overcoming the demands of the mind, becoming satisfied in heart, unless we actually become Krishna conscious. And there's a process there. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, these are my two favorite verses here, actually one of my favorite purports too. Krishna says, in all activities, this is 1857 and 58, in all activities just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So how do we do all things under Krishna's protection? What's the process for doing that? Yes, bhakti yoga. Specifically by acting under the instruction of the spiritual master. When we start doing things that are our business, our plans, our enjoyment, we're taking steps outside of the spiritual master's protection. And therefore, there will be consequences, whether they're good or bad. There will be consequences. However, when one is simply Ikiha Kuru Nandana, when one is simply fixed that I'm going to die fulfilling the order of my spiritual master, that I'm going to suffer all things I need to suffer in pursuance of fulfilling the order of my spiritual master. When one accepts that reality, then one can very easily understand the path of liberation, the path of going back home, back to Godhead. And in that way, one will not be affected by the onslaught of the material modes of nature. One will not become lost. Therefore, Krishna says, if you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. So this is a very powerful verse. So we have to become Krishna conscious. And then we can pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. Conditioned life doesn't mean the bad times. Conditioned life means the good times and the bad times. They're both just as entangling. So we cannot become conditioned to any of the modes of material nature. That also includes the mode of goodness, which is characterized by a sense of happiness and by a sense of knowledge. What is this knowledge? This knowledge means I know I'm not this body. Everything's good. Everything's fine all the time. La, la, la. And in that way, one simply loses their whole entire Krishna consciousness. They live in this la, la land. And Puranjana, he's so much more elevated than every one of us. Prachini Barastat is so much more elevated than every single one of us. He was living a very perfect grihastha life. He's following all the Vedic dharmas. He's doing karma kanda. We can't even qualify to perform karma kanda in this age. We're lower than malechas. We're lower than chandalas. So we have no qualification to even perform karma kanda. So what to speak of anything else? The only thing we can do is perform bhakti yoga. So if King Prachini Barastat is being instructed by Narada Muni, then what to speak of us? We find that so many of the characters in the Bhagavatam who are getting instruction, they're living more piously than every single one of us before our devotional lives. Chitraketu Maharaj, such a pious king. What to speak of, King Nriga, such a pious king. So many pious kings, pious individuals. Still, even Vyasadeva himself was severely chastised by his spiritual master, Narada Muni. because he didn't fully engage in devotional service. Instead, he took shelter of that which is temporary, that which has no reality. Deha patya kalatradish atma sanyash prasatsapi tesham pramato nidhanam pashinapi napashyatis pashinapi napashyati. Although they see that it's all just going to hell, everything's just falling apart, everybody's dying. Although they see, they don't take notice. They think this won't happen to me. They think I can survive Maya. Every single person we've ever seen go into Maya suffers. Yet still we think, I can handle it. This time will be different. And this is Maya's trick. We see this. But the material energy is so strong. Yes, Maya is very strong. Sometimes the devotees give that excuse. Maya is very strong, Prabhu. As if Maya is stronger than Krishna. And actually, Sureshwar Prabhu tells this in his Prabhupada memories. Prabhupada said, your conviction is weak. You know, that's why Maya is overcoming. Because we have weak conviction. When our conviction becomes strong, we can overcome Maya. And then only can we actually taste the nectar of the holy name. And if you become conscious of me, you can pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act in false ego, not hearing me, you'll be lost. What is this instruction Krishna is saying? What is he? He's saying, you have to become conscious. You have to become Krishna conscious. We have to do this process right. How do we hear Krishna? We hear Krishna in the order of the spiritual master. I prayed to Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur and in Vrindavan very deeply. Prabhupada, please let me taste what it's like to be a real follower, and what it's like to be a real person in this movement. And, Prabhupada, I believe in my whole heart, Srila Prabhupada guided me to take shelter of these books even deeper, read deeper, and to chant better rounds, and to hear his classes, and to do our service with enthusiasm. Mother Tsunami is a great example of a real follower of Srila Prabhupada. That's someone who, when we take shelter of these things, these basic principles, then we can go back home, back to Godhead. But if we neglect them, we put them to last, if we make our chanting a low priority, that should be the thing we hold the most sacred. If we make it a low priority, then how can we possibly expect to please Krishna? We're not taking the order of the spiritual master seriously. Simple order, like Vaisheshika Prabhu was asked in Mayapur by Kalakanta Prabhu. Vaisheshika Prabhu was giving class on the appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And because I was listening to my Prabhupada player, I went and listened to all of Prabhupada's classes about the appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And lo and behold, Vaisheshika Prabhu followed in the exact line and spoke exactly what Prabhupada spoke. And I was able to know that because I heard, I said, oh, he's speaking. He just heard. I know he went and listened to Prabhupada's classes on this. But Prabhupada brings out the importance of the order of the spiritual master. And only by the order of the spiritual master can we actually achieve this success in Krishna consciousness. Yasya devi para bhaktir yata devi tatagaro tasyate katita hirta prakasanta mahatmanaha. Only in one who takes full shelter of the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord are all the imports of Vedic knowledge revealed. And so Kalakanta Prabhu asked, yes, it's very nice, Srila Prabhupada asked, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta asked to, go preach in the West, and there's so many times, the spiritual master gives very nice specific instructions. But what if the only instruction one receives from the spiritual master is one should, chant your 16 rounds and follow 4 regulative principles? And Vaisheshika Prabhu, without a second, replied, I consider that person very, very fortunate. It's not a small thing to chant 16 real rounds. It's not a small thing to chant your 16 rounds in a real way, to really make it offenseless, to really hear every mantra, to really, really follow these 4 regulative principles your whole life with strictness. It's not a small thing. So if we neglect that, what to speak of anything higher? What to speak of anything higher? So in this purport, Prabhupada says, a person in full Krishna consciousness is not unduly anxious about executing the duties of his existence. The foolish cannot understand this great freedom from all anxiety. For one who acts in Krishna consciousness, Lord Krishna becomes the most intimate friend. He always looks after his friend's comfort, and he gives himself to his friend, who is so devotedly engaged, working 24 hours a day to please the Lord. Therefore, no one should be carried away by the false ego of the bodily conception of life. This is the thing. We should not be carried away by the bodily conception of life. The bodily conception of life is that which tells us, I need this, I need that. It's that what makes us create our own plans. And it's simply based in Matsarya, envy actually, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because Prabhupada, he says here, brings it out. By the false ego of the bodily conception of life. One should not falsely be independent of the laws of material nature or free to act. We think we're free to act. That's our big problem. We act here and we act there, and we make so many plans, and we're going to be happy in this way and that way. And I can have a little Krishna on the side. Okay. Jesus Christ said you cannot serve the Father and Mammon at the same time. You can't be in both worlds. You'll be torn apart. We see that actually. We see anybody who tries, they get torn apart. Krishna either brings them fully under his shelter, or they just fall away. You can't hold on to both. You have to serve one, because they're incompatible. So therefore, Krishna says, Sarva dharman prityaja mamekam sharanam vraja ham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha shami masuja. Abandon all your dharmas and surrender unto me. Mamekam sharanam vraja. Make me number one in your life. So the feature of the false ego, a lot of times, is defending, is the feature of the false ego. Gross and subtle. We find ourselves in conflicts so much of the time because of this defensive attitude. We want to defend our false ego. Rather than defend, we should just accept full responsibility for everything that happens to us. And realize that actually I don't need any, what do I have to defend? There's 6 types of aggressors. Someone who's a poison giver, someone who's burning your house, attacking with deadly weapons. In those cases, please defend. If someone's attacking another Vaishnava, please defend. If someone's just attacking, me and affecting my false ego, what's the point of defending? We should give up this defensive mentality. We're only defending our false ego. And then there's this, Prabhupada calls it subtle sex desire. Right? It leads to gross sex desire because we want to become adored. We want to become glorified. Therefore, sometimes you see, when I'm glorified, I'm up, I'm dancing, I'm happy, joy, joy, joy. And then now I feel like, oh no, I'm no good. I'm no enthusiasm. This is the false ego. It's a lower type of fuel. Right? We can be fueled in 2 ways. There's 2 types of motivation for every action. One can either be fueled by Krishna consciousness, or one can be fueled by false ego. And you can see the difference. When you're fueled by false ego, there's no sustainability. Someone who's fueled by false ego, there's no sustainability. They can maybe do something great one time, but then the next time they can't maintain. They can do, good sadhana one day, and the next day they can't. So therefore, there's an attack. There's not a taste for actual Krishna consciousness yet, or there could be in devotees, but we have to overcome this look at me consciousness. When that is there, we can't make any real progress. We're always going to be up and down. And you'll find that the false ego it acts very fast. It'll jump on an opportunity to do service, to show myself off, and then to, get the glory. And then once that fades away, then the false ego will be, he'll become depressed again. And then he'll be in the depressive mode, the depressive false ego. I'm so fallen, Prabhuji. I can't do service. I'm too fallen. This is also nonsense. So we can't have an inflated or deflated ego. We have to only have the consciousness of I'm a servant of Krishna. And then we can be satisfied by our intrinsic happiness. But I was thinking this morning, with all the various challenges in Krishna consciousness, that, it ain't easy to do what we're doing. Sometimes it's easy to think, it might be easier just to be a Christian. be a really, if I decided to go be a pastor at a Christian church, it'd be really, I'd be a really good Christian, be the best of them. You'd be the best Christian I'd ever seen, because we get totally crushed and put to the grinder, when we try to become Krishna conscious. We're asking for it daily. If we're sincere, we're asking for it daily. Krishna, take this away. Don't want it. I won't act on it. Take it away. I'll only do what you want me to do. I'm fully surrendered to the order of my spiritual master. And as hard and as challenging as that may be, please let me have the strength to continue on. I know that if I have this determination to serve my Gurudev and to serve Srila Prabhupada, then I'll meet Krishna in that order. And that order that's the same order as Lord Chaitanya. Go out and give this to others. Give Krishna to others. Make that the goal of your life. I'm going to give every person I meet Krishna. And so, yes, the false ego has no sustainability. He's also very much concerned, he's always thinking, oh, I'm up. When someone else is up, he's thinking, I must be down. So the false ego thinks. So there's no sustainability. It's not that it's, like we should condemn ourselves, but this is natural. At the beginning, we feel ourselves. We even feel our Krishna consciousness off this false ego. And therefore, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, many times they need wives. Because the wife is a great source of motivation for the false ego. Because the Kshatriya has to have some false ego, right? He's got to go out and fight. He's got to go out and earn and do so many things. And so the woman provides some impetus, some even subtle sense gratification to go and. However, any sincere person in whatever stage they're in, they overcome this, by taking Vanaprastha. Right? Vanaprastha, then the activities of husband and wife may live together, but the activities of sense gratification and this false ego nonsense is stopped. And now the basis is truly service. Truly service. Really, I'm dedicated to service. And the conversations are not based on mundane things. Conversations are based on service. The flirtatiousness has disappeared. And then at a certain point, the husband takes sannyas and goes to become a fully surrendered soul in the service of Krishna. This is the process. So we may have to deal with Mr. False Ego by, giving him some fuel once in a while so we can continue on in our Krishna consciousness. But know that unless we have that full surrender, we can't really do it. We have to just simply rely on the mercy of Krishna. So Prahlad had sustainability, right? Prahlad was being put through so many tortures, so many excruciating situations, but Prahlad Maharaj never lost an ounce of enthusiasm. He did not lose an ounce of his enthusiasm. He remained completely enthusiastic. And Jesus Christ never lost an ounce of his enthusiasm. Even while being, on Easter, I'd watched this for Good Friday. There was this thing that popped up like, what was it actually that Jesus Christ went through? And it was just explaining like, because it's described in the Bible that his flesh was hanging off in ribbons from the whipping. So he was going through blood loss. And then, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the crucifixion thorn. We have a bush here, actually. That's the same bush. Weirdly, it's here and it's in Israel. It's called the crucifixion thorn. You can find it in the desert. Those thorns were placed in his head, well, it just scientifically said, all that actually he went through, and any human being in that circumstance, generally resorts to anger, rage, fear. Instead, no, Krishna consciousness was not diluted in the least. And so any Krishna conscious person throughout all the bodily things they're going through, they still remain completely fixed on Krishna. What to speak? These are the great souls. We can't even, Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krota Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udaparasta Vegam, Etan Vegam, Yogashaheta Dira. We can't even control our 6 urges. You know, I'm disturbed by my tongue, belly, and genitals. And yet we see Jesus Christ and Haridas Thakur beaten in 22 marketplaces because he was free from false ego. He was situated on the spiritual platform. And in every case, it's because they were fixed in their vow of service to Guru and Krishna. They never let go of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. And they took that mission as life and soul. Srila Prabhupada himself read the commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And that commentary said one should take the order of the Guru as life and soul. And by that, accepting the order of the spiritual master, one can overcome the false ego. So the real key here is devotion. Are we devoted? Devotion is not a show bottle devotion. It's not what we want. Devotion means showing up on time. Devotion means doing it right. Devotion means even when everything is hard, everything is practically impossible. Devotion means that we still wake up and we chant our rounds with full conviction, and we see the deities with love, and we pay attention in class, and we read Prabhupada's books, because that's what Prabhupada has asked us to do, nothing else. So when we make that conviction that I'm going to actually do this, then we make progress. Then we taste it. Then we can see it. And we can see Krishna. But so much of the time, you know, we're still on the platform of those 4 pious people who surrender to Krishna. Those who are seeking wealth, those who are just seeking knowledge, those who are curious, those who are in distress. And so Prabhupada explains that 3 of those people, you know, their devotion is very unsteady. Because, you know, I'm in distress and I pray to God, please God, help me. Then when God helps me, I go back into nonsense. I know one person actually who, one devotee, my very good friend, he said, you know, he had went through a whole hellish situation. He said, you know, dear God, please, I'll never do this again. I'll never drink alcohol again. And I said, but you did it again. He goes, I know I'm a rascal, Prabhu. He said, because he was like super, super faded and drunk, and he got pulled over, and they had like a breathalyzer. he blew into it and blew a 0. He was like, because he was praying to God. And he's like, then the next week he did it again after he prayed to God and said he would never drink it. The next week he did it again and then got arrested. Anyways, sorry. It was nice devotee, but this is more beginning days, I suppose. But the key is real devotion. Do we have real devotion? Are we actually going deeper? I was thinking that, you know, like, I got back here to Tucson and I've been like, you know, on this solid sadhana schedule, chanting all my rounds early, reading every day. And I thought, like, now I'm foolproof. Now I can really, now Maya's not going to get me. And now that's just become the norm. And I feel like I have to go deeper. You know, I feel like, oh, yeah, you know, like, now I have to focus on paying attention more, even going deeper into the japa, reading with more attention, you know, working on my interactions with others, that it didn't, you know, it's just the mountain of light is infinitely high. And it's infinite how deep we can go. And so you may come to a new platform and you think that, yes, now I'm strong, but no, I'm weak. See how weak I actually am. I have to go deeper. So if we have real devotion means that we don't get distracted. Actually, Srila Prabhupada said once, neophyte means distraction. You know, I'm distracted by so many things. And therefore, if I'm distracted, I can't read good. I can't read my books read the books properly. I can't chant my rounds properly because I'm distracted. We don't get distracted. Overcome distraction by realizing the seriousness of the situation. We've been suffering repeated birth, death, and old age for so many lifetimes. For so many lifetimes, we've had this sense enjoyment. We've gone through every single, enjoyable thing. We've been in love. We've fallen out of love. We've been in hell. We've done it all. So let's make this life. Prabhupada said, just give this one life to Krishna. And it's not making it hard for us. It's making it easy. Giving a life to Krishna means that we just be good devotees. Just be good devotees. Take up all the rules and regulations that Prabhupada has given us and follow them strictly. Prabhupada told us to chant 64 rounds. Lord Chaitanya, the Chaitanya Bhagavat says, I don't speak to anybody who's not, 64 rounder. I don't speak to him. Lord Chaitanya said, go out of my presence if you don't chant 64 rounds. And, Vijay Prabhu, he read that when he was such a sincere person. When he came to Krishna consciousness, he read someone gave him the nectar of instruction. And it says in the intro that, one is fallen if he doesn't chant 64 rounds. So Vijay started chanting 64 rounds. Then when he went to the temple the first time, the devotees hadn't met him, said, hey, I'm so-and-so. And, oh, welcome in. Yeah, I've been reading these books. And I'm chanting 64 rounds a day. All the devotees were like, you chant 64 rounds. So he chanted 64 rounds for weeks and weeks before he even met the devotees. And Vijay Prabhu is still unlimitedly sincere and undistracted by Maya. In fact, he wakes up at like 1 a.m., chants his 16 rounds, reads Prabhupada's books for 2 hours, distributes Prabhupada's books for 5 hours, reads Prabhupada's books some more, and goes to bed early. And he's been doing that sustainably for, since 1978. Once again, a very amazing devotee. We can always go deeper. If we think that I'm not going to go deeper, that going deeper is extracurricular, and I'm good, then we're in trouble. Like Chaina was talking with me the other day, and she said, do you ever feel like you let down your spiritual master? I said, oh yeah, I feel like that every day. I said, I think that anybody who feels like I'm good with the order of the guru, then they're not doing well spiritually. They're suffering. They're not actually doing well. So we need to go deeper. We need to have tolerance. We need to tolerate all the urges, all the desires, all the plans that our mind wants to make, all the ideas of how I'm going to be happy. We tolerate that. We take shelter of hearing and chanting. We have to hear and chant every day, a lot every day. And if we can hear and chant every day, and then we can go out and make devotees, and we take up the mood and mission of our guru, then we will meet Krishna in the order of the spiritual master. There's no doubt about that. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogain sevate sagunan samatit yatan brahmabhuya yakalpate. Unflinching and unwavering devotion to transcend the modes of material nature. And by that, how do we do that? We do that. The guru gives us the means, the work, the mission, the service. Take up that service and begin to cultivate the consciousness by service to the spiritual master. One cultivates the consciousness of, I am a servant and my business is service. My business isn't sense gratification. It isn't, lollygagging around. It's devotional service with one point of determination, making plans to serve Krishna. Then we can make progress. Then we can go back home, back to Godhead. It's very easy, but it's not so, the execution can be challenging. That's it. We just take that order seriously. And Shushushro Shradanasya Vasudeva Kataruchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirthana Shevanat. By serving the spiritual master, and those devotees who are free from vice, one develops taste for hearing and chanting. So we go out and we preach, and we'll develop more taste for hearing and chanting. And then Srimata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. Krishna cleanses our heart. And the process goes on. Eventually, Evam Prasana Manasa, the mind being in contact with devotional service becomes enlivened. Prasana Manasa, your mind becomes enlivened. Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha, Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana, because one has now achieved scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. Mukta Sangasya Jayate, in this stage of complete liberation from material entanglement. This is the process. I think we'll stop here and ask for questions or comments. Mother Sandamani.
I have 2 comments and 1 question. Comments. One of the, well, you said that you're talking about Prabhupada and being depressed and saying, "Oh, I'm no good." And Prabhupada said that when a devotee said to him, "Oh, Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen," and then Prabhupada said, "You are not the most of anything." So that was great. You mentioned that we're enlivened by 2 things, motivated by 2 things. One is Krishna and the other one's Maya. But I was thinking sometimes I get a little down, but then I think, there's pesto pasta for lunch. And then, or there's curd in the subji or something. And then I get a little enlivened. So what category, where does that fall? Because I get enlivened by prasadam.
Well, you're a person who only eats prasadam. So because you only eat prasadam, then, it's all purified. And I only eat prasadam. But still, we're not, we're all mercy cases. We're not Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, and so it's okay to like prasadam. Prabhupada very much was serious about how he had his prasadam. He was very serious about having nice prasadam. And, he asked for nice prasadam. He chastised his disciples who couldn't make the prasadam nice. So there's nothing wrong with, appreciating those material things when they come in due course of our service. But we shouldn't let that, affect our determination to hear and chant. Whether the prasadam is good or bad, the hearing and chanting must go on. But anyhow, it's still good. I was talking to this devotee, one of my friends, Magadari Prabhu, who's the president of Kansas City. He's a very close associate of Danavir Goswami Maharaj, who's such a pure devotee. And he was saying, I asked Prabhu, how did you get to be the way you are? He said one of the biggest things is not eating too much. He started saying all this, and then at the end he goes, Maharaj told me that this is something that I can wait a while on. So, that's right. What else?
So you were talking about, devotion and even when things are, like even when Haridas Thakur was being beaten in 22 marketplaces, he was still being Krishna conscious. And so, I try to have that attitude, even if I'm not feeling good. I try to always do my service, or when things are going bad. But sometimes I feel like, people might say, "Oh, well, you're not honoring your feelings, and you're not." I've heard people say things like this, and so what do you say about that?
There's some truth to that.
Yeah.
There's some truth to we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to you can't just pretend we don't have emotions. It's not going to work. But we have to also deal with that accordingly in the Krishna conscious way. So sometimes we might we have to realize we're attached to Krishna, not the work. By being attached to the work, we're attached to karma yoga. Really, that's karma yoga. It's Krishna consciousness to a degree, but it's not pure devotional service. Krishna consciousness means being attached to Krishna. And we can think, what's pleasing Krishna and what really is my business as a devotee of Krishna, comes down to our hearing and chanting. Prabhupada said health, take care of our health, first, then take care of our chanting, and then seva. So if we're really attached to, I gotta look at me, I'm doing my seva, and I'm so strong because I get up every day and I'm doing my seva. We get that attitude, and that's karma yoga at best. At worst, it's just false ego nonsense. But when we have the consciousness of I'm actually taking care of my body, I'm going to bed on time, I'm taking prasadam right, I'm really attached to Krishna. And how do I do that? How does that manifest? By being attached to Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, and so forth. When those things are solid, Bhakti Yoga is there. When those things aren't solid, we're sinking into the Karma Yoga and even lower. So therefore, the manifestation or the real sign of that steadiness is that a person is regularly hearing or chanting, hearing, chanting, hearing and chanting. It's solid. We're not like up and down on that stuff.
And so where's that line? Because I feel like I've seen sometimes, people, where's the line between honoring your feelings and kind of wallowing in your misery, right?
Well,
And then you're not doing your service because, oh no, I'm so depressed or I'm so this and.
The line is sometimes it needs guidance. We need to take guidance from your spiritually advanced personalities. But also we can understand that what's favorable. And when something is essentially hurting our process of hearing, chanting, and deity worship and so forth, when those processes are being hurt, we can understand this is really actually nonsense and business. It has no reality. Ritartam yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani. Tad vidyadatmano maya. Yatavasot yatatamaha. Just whatever we see of value, it has no connection to Krishna. It's not helping my Krishna consciousness. It's just Maya. We should understand it to be Maya. A reflection of the truth situated in ignorance. Lord Krishna tells Mama. So, basically, we just balance it so that we can hear and chant and do our service nicely. If you're doing your deity worship, that's also service. We do that so it's nice. When that is done nicely, then, we may have to drop out, certain material things or, this and that, or miss a thing here so that we can maintain the real things that matter. And that takes some balance and that takes some prayer. And Krishna gives us the intelligence when we have the sincerity to not be distracted. Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupiyatite. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, which we cannot do unless we have the mercy of Guru. Guru mercy means now I'm constantly engaged in this service of spreading Krishna consciousness somehow or another. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Krishna will help you. Chandrika had a question.
So when, some people, I was talking about depression or if people are sick and things like that, as a devotee, of course, it's easy to judge somebody and say, oh, you're sick or you're depressed or something, you're not doing service, you need to get over that and become Krishna conscious. But as a devotee, isn't it important for us to be compassionate as well, to really deeply understand what compassion is, and with that compassion, give the association that we need to give as devotees? This is about association. When everything's going all wonderful and we're just congregating together, that's also association, but on a individual basis, sometimes that compassion needs to be there. So say something about that.
Yeah, we have to have compassion by associating properly. I mean, we have to be, mindful of the body, and we don't, tell devotees they're not this body when they're suffering, but, but at the same time, we don't want to have false compassion and just, pretend that, we have to also, our compassion is manifesting in being, encouraging them in Krishna consciousness. That's the compassion. That's the real compassion. It's not that, we have to take care of the body and we do what we can, and, we do according to our ability to help the person in their bodily condition. But, that's all secondary. The real compassion is, to associate by being a sadhu, by speaking and hearing about Krishna and keeping them Krishna conscious. And trying to, sadhu also means to cut. And so sometimes the most compassionate thing is sometimes that, strong, like Dhritarashtra was in so much pain and suffering. Dhritarashtra was, it's described, he's blind his whole life, he's mucus and he was dying, and Vidura came and he said, you're a fool. You're a rascal, and you're living like a dog in the house of your family who you tried to kill. You know, you're disgusting. Not that we should do that, but this is Vidura had that conviction and said, you know, therefore you should go and find God and leave in the middle of the night. And so Vidura was considered the greatest saintly person. In fact, so much so that Lord Krishna's last thought on this planet was of Vidura. His last words were, please, he told Uddhava, please go to Vidura and deliver him. The Vidura was such a saint. However, his compassion manifested in the cutting words of cutting his brother very deeply. So not that we should, you know, cut like that unless we have that relationship, but real compassion means we maintain ourselves on the spiritual platform. So we only help people's bodies on the spiritual platform. We don't, you know, like, you know, we don't want to, and that includes in everything. We don't want to push someone into their false ego. And we want to help them to understand in a very calm and compassionate way that they're not this body, make them think of Krishna. Yeah. Kirtanesvara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.